All right. All right. Well, shalom to each and every one of you amazing humans out there. Let's come together and just bow ourselves to each other. Namaste. Humbly. May we present ourselves to each other. Well, I hope that you guys have really been blessed. I hope that you've been, actually, I would say it as far as I hope you guys have, those of you who have been with me, I hope you've been dancing in your insides from what we saw on Saturday. It's been quite amazing to me, the liberation and the beauty and the knowledge, and even more so the desire inside of me to be all of the things that we often struggle with so much. It doesn't mean that I'm perfect in doing them. It just simply means that something kicked over, something flipped over. And of course, I know that knowledge removes the emptiness, and so that's really what's going on. So we're in chapter 20 of this wonderful book of Dolores's, bringing out ancient wisdom and knowledge out of seemingly normal human beings. And so I'm hoping that we can actually, these chapters are a little bit shorter. And I have to tell you that just as was the message on Saturday, man, there's some really pretty stuff in here that we haven't seen. I would hope that you will be a good enough and an attentive enough student that you will begin to see that all of the different facets that I'm showing you from different times and how much those things interface with each other and how much they are very much a piece of the same picture, and that picture doesn't look anything like maybe you were brought up religiously believing, and tonight's not any different. So I want to get rolling here, and hopefully, as I said, we can make it through 2, maybe 3 of these chapters, because I guarantee you it's a roller coaster. So, all right, chapter 20, Jesus and John, 2 students at Qumran. So during another session, I came across Saudi while he was teaching. And again, this would not have been an unusual situation, except that his hesitancy to answer alerted me that there was something special was going on. There was the same undercurrent of secrecy that was present so many times. The question was always how to get around this built-in guard. He admitted only that he had 2 students, and from his carefully worded answers, I sensed who the students might be. I would have to proceed cautiously to find the answers, and I asked him what he was teaching them. And so Saudi responds, I teach the law. He paused and he smiled tenderly. This to me seems very odd. How can one teach the law to someone who knows it better than I know myself? He gave a gentle laugh, and Dolores asked him, are you speaking of your students? And Saudi responds, I am speaking of one of them, yes. And so Dolores writes, now I felt certain I knew whom he was teaching, but how to get him to admit it? And so Saudi says, they are both very intelligent. One is more of the fire temperament, and the other one just sits there and looks at you. And sometimes you feel so incredibly stupid because he puts a point across and it is like you have been shown this for the first time. And you look at it with new light and with new eyes. And so I told him I was surprised because I wondered what a child could teach a teacher. Saudi responds, a child can teach many adults many things. How to love, how to be open, how to love others without considering perhaps what they will attain from the other person. And I asked for an example of something he had shown him, and Saudi gave me the following. Saudi says, he is very observant. He watches everything as if to learn from everything. He said that when a plant is growing, it knows when to put out new branches, and it knows when to blossom and when to seed. And it knows when to do all of these things without any apparent guidance. It seems to know these things out of thin air, so to say. So in the heart of things, man can know things out of thin air. The way the plants do with the more basic things, because man is a more advanced creature, he could know more advanced things out of the thin air and use these things for guiding his life and actions. I cannot tell it the way he did. He has a beautiful way with words. And so Dolores asked him, are these things that he has told you that you had not taught or you had not thought of by yourself? And Saudi responds, no, not necessarily that hadn't been thought of, but it is like a breath of spring, clearing the dust and the cobwebs away so that you may see it clearly, perhaps for the first time. And so Dolores says, he must be an unusual child. Are your students very old? And Saudi responds, they are not yet to their bar mitzvahs. They are 12 and a half. And since I did not have knowledge of Jewish customs, I thought the bar mitzvah was celebrated when the boys reached the age of 12, but Saudi said it was at 13. I wanted a little more information about what he was teaching them. By the law, did he mean the Torah? And so Saudi says it is part of the Torah, but the law is those laws given to us by Moses. The things that we must daily live by in order to be considered holy and on the right path. These are guidelines, as it were. It is just part of the Torah. It is just one of the sections, as it were. And so Dolores asks, can you tell me briefly some of the laws that are important? And Saudi responds, he says, there are all the dietary rules. There are the laws, of course, the commandments, the honor thy father and mother, and keep the Sabbath day holy, and do not commit adultery or sin or steal or lust or any of those. Those are part of the law. How you must treat those who work with you, how you must deal with, say, like if a husband dies, who then that the wife would become wife to. There are those laws. Everything about day-to-day existence is down in the law. Then there is the law that goes into such as how long you may have a slave as part of your possession, and the laws of slave and free man and such useless things. What do you mean, useless things? Saudi says, if there were no slaves, why would there be laws of them? And so Dolores writes, this was true. There were no slaves in Qumran, but Saudi even thought it was useless. Saudi said even though it was useless, it was tradition to learn these things. Of course, they would be important for someone living outside of the walls to know. I asked him to explain the law of the slave and the freedman. And so Saudi responds, well, after 7 years, the Hebrew is no longer a slave. You must be bound by law to set this slave free and make him a free man, unless under certain circumstances. There are differences in this. but they are very few, and it's very complicated and very involved, but this is the basis of it. And so Dolores asked, are the Essenes laws different from the Torah? And Saudi responds, you would not consider them Essene laws. And here we go. They are the laws of nature. The law of manifestation, where that to desire and then to know that it shall be fulfilled and the need shall be fulfilled. These laws are the basic laws of nature. This is what is also being taught. But there are others who would teach them this, how to utilize every part of oneself for what is the purpose of one's life. What is the goal to ultimately reach? That goal so that one may become fulfilled with his life. What a profound statement. The law of nature, people now are trying with all of them to come to the understanding and then to share manifestation. If you've done any looking on YouTube, there are a whole bunch of people that are teaching people how to manifest things. And yet Saudi just taught us how to manifest. I'll show you how this plays out in a non-biblical New Testament interpretation. Everything that you heard Yeshua, I've been pondering this a lot. Not just this one facet, but it's more of a thought process. But everything that Yeshua taught, if you stop and think about it, is actually, if you've done any learning about metaphysical things and esoteric things, everything that he taught was metaphysical. That is to say, he said, if you believe in your heart and do not doubt. And he said that 100 different ways. He told us how to manifest. And there can be no manifestation outside of that. So whether they know that or not is really not the subject. What is vitally important is that we begin to understand that Yeshua wasn't what you've been told he was. He didn't do the things in the manner in which you were told that they were done. Although, if you were a secular, materialistic, carnal human being following religion, you could have certainly written the words in that manner. But to be sure, you would have to be a materialistic, carnal, religious person to interpret what he did that way. We all have been. We were taught the wrong interpretation. We were taught a materialistic interpretation. They have filled hangars full of jet planes and have 50,000 square foot houses out of the pockets of millions of people to tell them a carnal, materialistic message about how to know God. And so, as you saw on Saturday, even though they are making large money and they have large buildings and they possess all of these possessions, they still are ignorant to who and what they are. Because you could never sell their message if you knew what the truth was. And so, I think it's quite strange. They are laws of nature, the law of manifestation, where that to desire and then to know that it shall be fulfilled. Faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. Over and over. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. Well, what is faith? Faith, some people believe that religion is your faith. And if that is your faith, then that's all that you can manifest is religion. Because faith, my friend, has zero to do with religion and everything to believe, to be tied to what is your thought. And there's some pieces that go with that, which are the power that drives that, which is also your intentions. And I could get hung up here for several hours because I have much to say about this belief and intentions. And so, the law of manifestation is a natural law. In fact, I would love to share with you tonight that you are manifesting all that's inside of you that you believe. Right now, every one of us. See, a law of nature, unfortunately, doesn't take a break. Okay? Gravity doesn't say, well, we're tired today, so we're not going to be gravity anymore. We're going to take a break. The earth did this, or people did that, or this happened, so we're going to take a break. And that's how many of you believe that these things work. Even if not in understanding, it's in action. You are manifesting. And I think this is going to be one of the greatest lessons for those people who become alive. To understand many of the things that all of these people are trying to attain, you already possess. The problem is you have no clue or knowledge, number one, that you do, and number two, what to do with it if you even did find it. And so, the law of manifestation, where that to desire, anybody remember the verse that says that God gives us the desires of our heart? Where that to desire and then to know that it shall be fulfilled. Whatever thing you ask, if you believe when you ask it, Yeshua says, I tell you the truth, I tell you the truth, you will have it. So all of the people, all of my life, all of the Christians, all of the people, all of the speaking in tongues, all of the going to church, all of the religion, all of the dogma, all of the doctrine, and none of them even know the way. None of them. So can I just happenstantly wish that something would happen? Is wishing and faith the same thing? Is wishing and manifestation the same thing? And so, to desire and then to know that it shall be fulfilled. Paul speaks about this as well. You must believe that whatever thing you have asked that you got. If there is no belief in that, no faith in that, no expectation, hope of that, if there is none of that, you won't get. You will not manifest. But you will manifest what you do believe in. I know that lots of people have a failure of understanding words very often, and they're very destructive to you if you aren't very critical about words. And this is speaking to all of us, because all of us have done this probably on 1,000 levels. But I will tell you also, just because that has been doesn't mean that's what should be, nor does it mean what you can afford to be. I think you're about to watch some things for some of you who are hearing in your heart. I'm not talking about in your head, because you won't remember it by the time I get done tonight, which is where most people live. To desire and then to know that it shall be fulfilled and the need shall be fulfilled. These laws are the basic laws of nature. Wow. Might seem like a simple, silly little thing, friend, but the world was just given to you. This is what is also being taught. But there are others who would teach them this: how to utilize every part of oneself. We're in a metaphysical phase, whether you recognize it or not. For what is the purpose of one's life? What is the goal that you are to ultimately reach? That goal so that one may become fulfilled with his life. So then you could ask yourself, well, is it possible for somebody to live a life and not fulfill their goals? Absolutely. In fact, I would tell you the truth that most will come in and go out and never accomplish. And many and most will never even begin to minimize the karmic effect that has come with them from 10 lives before. I'm starting to see this whole karmic effect, and it's I think most people are very confused about how karma works. Karma works just exactly like what I just shared with you works. It's not that gravity works every now and then, but then it stops because it gets tired and takes a day off. Karma is also like gravity. It's like every other law of nature. Karma is always working. The only thing that determines what karma is, my friend, is you. And whether you like it or don't, whether you're conscious of it or don't, and maybe most aren't, I don't really know the answer to that question. But irrelevant to where you're at mentally or any other place spiritually, karma is still working based on what's inside of you. And here's the dilemma. I used to preach about these in foreign concepts in Christianity, and I just had no words to put together all of the things that are starting to become very clear. My friend, you already are fulfilling the Bible. Simply by being a human that is alive, you are fulfilling the Bible. The only question is which outcome are you creating for yourself? Those things are not ifs. They're not maybes. Karma's not a maybe. Well, maybe if I do bad things, something bad will happen to me. It's not a maybe, friend. It's not a maybe. And because there is a backlash with karma, oftentimes you did something 25 years ago to somebody, and in your time of least being capable of dealing with it, be careful because it still hasn't been paid back. That's why people do evil things when they're young, and then they get in their 50s and 60s when they're the most vulnerable, and all of a sudden bad things begin to happen to them. And they can't figure out, why is all of this bad stuff happening to me? They never stop long enough to go back and remember that they did the same thing that's happening to them. They did that to other people. It's very sad because, unfortunately, as is often it goes with things, you can't change the past, and you can't stop what's coming to you. Can we mitigate it? At some levels, absolutely. But that's a very fine line in there. So suffice to say that the laws of nature are constantly working. If you have no faith, you have no substance. If you have no intent, you have no purpose for having faith. Because what sets what comes to you is what you intend. If you intend to benefit yourself and harm others, you will get your intention. I know you guys might not have had this concept. Maybe some of you have, and you've already begun to have this revelation. But you are getting what you are. You are getting what you are doing, what you are thinking, what you are sending out, what you are intending. You are getting all of those metaphysical things and will continue to, according to you. And so that's why the link of the heart to the soul is so huge. So He says, this is what is also being taught, but there are others who would teach them this: how to utilize every part of oneself. That's a concept that we probably haven't really even begun to look at, much less to walk in. How do you utilize all of yourself? Well, I would think probably the first thing that you have to do to utilize oneself is first to have humbled yourself enough to accept the truth about who you are. And to do that, you have to look at yourself. And since most people won't look at themselves, they will never even begin the journey. I can give you all these great truths, and they're useless to you unless you begin the journey. And so, what is the purpose of one's life? What is the goal to ultimately reach? What are we trying to do here? Or even more, what is Source trying to accomplish? What is the purpose of your life? What is the goal to ultimately reach? That goal so that one may become fulfilled with his life. So every one of these lives that are talked about as we go out, one of the purposes is hopefully that we awaken every life enough that we recognize that when we go out, there's a debt. And you'll pay that debt in the next life. And of course, it's kind of difficult when you're old like I am and you have a debt and you've never been told that there's a debt, and so you have no knowledge that there's a debt. Then I can guarantee you have a pretty large bag of accruement that has happened because you had no knowledge. You were those ignorant people I shared with you that did not even know that you were already in God, while you had worked hard to attain salvation and acceptance by God. So Dolores says these Essene beliefs are not found in the Torah. Indeed, they're not. It is not that it is not there, Saudi says. The laws are there for all to see. Those principles are all over the scriptures. It is just that they are not paid any particular attention. And many won't pay them any particular attention, even now that they're being expressed. Well, to many people, it's just words anyways, Dolores says. They don't really understand. Wow. Isn't that exactly what I shared with you on Saturday? But these are the words of the Lord our God, Saudi says. I mean, they are holy. It is beyond me how men, and there are many, go on in their day-to-day existence denying that God exists. For these I feel great sorrow, for they are going through life blinder than one born without eyes. For they have closed the eyes of their soul. And so Dolores writes, I thought I would try again to get the names of the students. He hesitated, but he finally answered. There is young Ben Joseph, and then there is Ben Zacharias. Finally, I had gotten through. He did not realize that I had tricked him. He could not tell me the names of the Messiah and the way preparer, but it was all right to reveal the names of his students, since he thought I would not be able to associate the two. He could not be aware that these names would be enough for me to identify them. Apparently, Ben in front of a name means son of, so the son of Joseph, the son of Zacharias, both of which they truly were. And the names Joseph and Zacharias made it clear he was speaking of Jesus and John. He had no way of knowing that I knew the significance of their fathers' names and that I would be able to put two and two together. Now I would have names to use that might elude the barrier of protectedness. He could talk freely about his students without realizing he was giving anything away. And so Dolores says, he said these were their fathers' names. They had two names. That is their second name, as you would word this, yes. He still refused to give me their first names. That was all right. He did not realize he had told me enough already. And so Dolores asked the question, have these students been studying with you very long? And Saudi responds, since perhaps they were 8 years old, about 4 or 5 years. Already studying the deeper things in the Torah by the time they're 8 years old. I now knew I could ask questions about Ben Joseph and he would answer, unaware that I knew Ben Joseph and the Messiah were one and the same. This method proved very effective. And so Dolores begins and she asks, where did Ben Joseph live before he came to you? Saudi responds, for a while he sojourned in Egypt and far off from there to learn. Some would tell you, and rightly they would be saying so, that he was in India, he was in Tibet, he was in China. And so Dolores asks, some people say that a child cannot think for themselves and learn anything when they are that young. Saudi responds, that is because they are not treated as though they have any intelligence. Is that not exactly how we treat children? When you hear these things, when you hear even rabbis, people that I know that have grown up in the Jewish faith that live today, that are younger than me, whose daddy had them on his knee when they were 3 years old, teaching them the Torah. And we think that our children need a video game to occupy their time. We really don't know, and you won't know for several generations more, how much destruction we have allowed into our lives. It's not somebody else's fault. It's your fault. If you have children and you did not teach them properly, well, that failure wasn't your fault, but it is. And so this is because they are not treated as though they have any intelligence. Therefore, they have no need to show that they have powers of thought and assimilation. And one of the metaphysical places that you find this, for those of you maybe who've looked around and maybe you've stopped long enough, paused long enough to actually think and to ask yourself, why is it that children, and a large quantity of children, function in the spirit realm, but adults don't? We tell them that they're boogeymen under the bed because they saw a spirit and were talking to it. And so, therefore, they have no need to show that they have powers of thought and assimilation. It is said that the first 7 years of a child are what makes the man. Now, here is Saudi teaching modern day psychology. Modern day science says that every child, until they're of the time of 70, are learning just like a computer is being downloaded with a program, everyone around them. The people they don't like, the people they do like, the people that birthed them, the people who birthed their parents. Every one of those people in a child's life, including society, are programming that child. That's why if you have a racist-based belief system, your child will most probably also have the same. And it's because you programmed them to hate someone from their earliest age. Now, we can't teach them how good things, but we can teach them to hate. Which tells you that you can teach them good things. And so, this is Saudi telling us what modern day science is telling the world, friends. It is said that the first 7 years of a child are what makes the man. He is a very unusual student. Therefore, yes, I would say they taught him. It is said that he went with his cousin to see many places farther away. This I do not know. I have not questioned him upon this. I do not feel it is my right. So, yet again, those 15 years that are missing in the life of Jesus, friends, if you would open your eyes and stop and think for a second, he just explained to you why they could take those 15 years and nobody have any knowledge about who Jesus, if you would, even was. Because he wasn't what you've been told he is. Almost in any shape or form. And so, therefore, yes, I would say they taught him. It is said that he went with his cousin to see many places farther away. This I do not know. But it's obvious that they were already talking about it at that point. And so Dolores says, do you know which cousin that was? Saudi responds, it is one of his mother's cousins. I'm not sure. I believe it is his cousin. His name is also Yosef. Which isn't surprising because Joseph was a very common name in the Davidic line which he came out of. His father was Joseph. And I was surprised that his mother would have allowed him to go so far away, but Saudi said that she also went with them on these journeys. And so Dolores asked him, is his mother living with you now? And Saudi responds, no, they live in their own home. They did at one time live in the community, but they have other children to take care of, and there are many things that must be done in order to live day to day. They felt that he will benefit from our knowledge and our teachings. They come here quite frequently and they visit, and he goes home with as great a frequency. They live in Nazareth. It is a few days' journey. Maybe once a month they come to see him, and again, then he goes and sees them. Therefore, the contact has not been broken. And so Dolores says, is the law the only thing that you teach these boys? And Saudi responds, yes, but they study with all of the teachers here. They learn mathematics, the study of the stars, the study of the prophecies, the mysteries, the metaphysics, everything that we could possibly teach them. And so Dolores says, do you think they are good students? Saudi responds, yes, I would say that they are. So every time he spoke of them, there was great affection in his voice. They were Saudi's only students. He had been devoting his time exclusively to teach them. Thus, the elders at Qumran must have considered their education a very important project. Now remember that Saudi knew who he was. And so chapter 21, Jesus and John, completion of their studies. When Jesus and John were 14 years old, I came across Saudi as he was writing a certificate for them. They must leave, and this is to say that I have taught them and to have examined them and found them to have sufficient knowledge in law to be considered first in law, well enough to themselves to teach. So to be first in law meant that you were capable of teaching the law. And at this point, I got out a tablet and a marker I had procured, and I asked him to write for me some of what he was putting on the certificate. I especially wanted him to write the names of his students, but he said, the students will write their names in. It must be signed by them. He opened his eyes, took the marker, looked curiously at it. He took it with his right hand, although Katie is normally left-handed. It was obviously a strange object to Saudi, and he felt the point trying to figure out which end to use. He then wrote something from right to left across the paper, but to me it looked like scribbling, and I asked what it said. He said, "It is just basically to anyone that it would be important to that I have found that these students are first in law." It goes on, but that is part of it. And so she asked, "Have they been good students?" Saudi responds, "For the most part. There was some heated arguments at times, but for the most part, they were very good children." "Were these arguments between the boys or with you?" Saudi responds, "A lot of this was between the two of them. They didn't agree with the teachings." Oh, so now we see why he had so many problems and why the Pharisees had so much problem with both John and Yeshua. They didn't believe the teachings. What a profound statement, friends. They didn't agree with the teachings. It was not that they did not agree with the teachings. Perhaps they did not agree with each other's interpretations. He had difficulty with that word of the teachings. "Did you ever have any arguments with them?" Saudi responds, "None that I recall," and he smiled. Ben Yosef, he never had to argue. He just looked at you. If he felt that you weren't understanding, perhaps, his point of view on a certain thing, and he had gone over it several times, he would just look at you with those soulful eyes. And it was just like he was saying that even though I know you do not understand, I forgive you anyways. And that would be the end of anything. Who would think of arguing with him? And so during all these years, they were Saudi's only students. The classes are kept very small so that they will be sure to learn everything that has been taught. To have more would divide the attention too thinly. Saudi had not made as many trips to Nazareth because his work with them had taken precedent over everything else. He was not going to have any more students after they left. And so Dolores asked, "I thought you had to teach all the time." Saudi responds, "No, there are times between students, yes. We are allowed time for further studies, other things to do. It is my time to go out from the community for a while, to see what is going on in the world. It is time for a break. I must go out and speak to others so that they would know the great things that are happening and give them hope and hopefully understanding of maybe their lives and the why of things." Will you do this by going to people's homes or in public places in the towns? Saudi responds, "Sometimes both ways. We will become teachers to them. If there is only one, then you will teach the one. If there are many more who are willing to learn, then you will teach them, all that are willing." Most of the teaching would be done by word of mouth, since most of the people, they are unable to read any script or anything of this nature. This sounded very similar to what Jesus told his disciples to do in the New Testament. This idea could very likely have come from the practice of the Essenes. And so Dolores asks, "Are women allowed to learn from you?" Saudi responds, "Of course. This is understood by women as well as men. Why not?" "Because I have heard that the Jews don't even allow the women in their synagogues." Saudi responds, "They have a very narrow-minded look at existence." And so Dolores asks again, "Do Essene women ever go out to teach?" Saudi responds, "Usually they teach just in the school, unless it perhaps to go to a community that they are accepted in, as they would be here, because it can be more dangerous for them to go out there than it would be for, say, myself. Do you expect to meet any opposition?" Saudi responds, yes. There are people who never return. Oh my God. Are you guys going to be able to hear this? There are people who never return. So much for a swath of the New Age movement. There are people who never return. The Romans will not like what I have to say. The people in power do not always like prophets. They are not very popular. To give hope to the masses is to perhaps break their link at control. Do you understand the principle's not any different than what I shared, exposed to you on Saturday? Do you know how hard religion has worked to hide that from you? Because if you had known that you did not need to seek God's approval, you need to bless his approval by your acceptance of truth. One of the acceptances of truth is that I am a child of God. I'm not trying to be one. I already am. And so, to give hope to the masses is to perhaps break their link at control. And they feel that they are losing control of the matter, and this frightens them, and this is part of the problem. Where are you going to go whenever you leave? Saudi responds, it has not been brought to my knowledge yet. And whether that is they haven't told him or whether he was waiting on source to give him direction as to what he was to do. And I asked for more information about Jesus, or Ben Joseph, as Saudi called him. Dolores asks, does Ben Joseph have any brothers and sisters? Saudi responds, he has, let me think, 6 brothers and I think 3 sisters. He is the eldest. Was he trained in any type of work besides his studies? Saudi responds, he is a carpenter as his father. And so Dolores asks, what type of carpentry is done in your community? Saudi responds, there are house people who erect the houses. There are those who build furniture inside. There are those who would help build the temples. There are different types. The things that he does the most is he would build the furniture and he makes some very beautiful things. Many woods are available here. Then there are those things that he must be brought in. It depends on what you wish to use it for. There is wood for furniture. There would not be wood for, say, building a temple out of. It would not be done. It would be done with bricks, or she has it plural, marbles, but it was actually with brick or marble. And so Dolores asks, what kind of personalities would you say the 2 boys have? Saudi responds, they are 2 very different personalities. Ben Zacharias is very exuberant. He is very much alive. He is very joyful with life and the celebration of life. Ben Joseph is, he gets as much enjoyment of life, but it's perhaps in a quiet way. It's like comparing the tiger lily, which is wild and exotic and flashy, and comparing it to the lily. Just the lily of the fields. They are very quiet and very small, but in their own way, as beautiful as the tiger lily is in its exotic way. That's how John and Yeshua were. I think it was significant that Saudi used this comparison. Jesus has been called the lily of the valley many times. I assume this was the small lily of the fields that Saudi referred to. And so Dolores asked him again, does Ben Joseph seem to be of a sad nature? And Saudi responds, no, he is a joyful child. He delights in everything. It is as if he sees with eyes that are just newly awakened and see the glory in all. That's really, the wording is so beautiful because it really is metaphysical as well as physical. He sees the beauty in everything around him, but higher than that. He actually sees the beauty in the all. Do you know if he knows of his destiny? Saudi sighs. He has knowledge. It is something that there is a very calm acceptance of. A deeper sigh. But it is, how can one explain it? He knows perhaps what shall he to be, but his attitude is of a let's wait and see. And just living each day as it comes so far. Then it doesn't bother him if he knows what might happen in the future. Saudi says, I'm not his conscience. I cannot say if it truly bothers him. And so Dolores says, this topic seemed to bother Saudi, so I decided to try to get some information about where the boys would be going when they left Qumran. And Saudi says, I'm not sure. They go on their journeys. Their pathway has been determined by the teachers. The elders know, they have knowledge of this. But it is for their path. Well, are they going to a different country or will they stay in this area? Saudi responds, it is very possible that they shall travel to others. And Dolores asks, do you think their parents will go with them? Saudi responds, it is possible that Ben Joseph's mother might, but it is very doubtful Ben Zacharias' mother lives with us. But he will be traveling with his cousins, so they probably will go again with Ben Yosef's mother's cousins, all of which are the children of David, just so you know. And so this was the same person that Jesus had traveled with in his first journeys as a small child. Dolores asks, will they be gone a long time? Saudi responds, who can say? It is for Yahweh to decide. Do you think you will ever see the boys again? Saudi, sadly, one I shall never see again. The other I shall see. Ben Zacharias, our paths shall not cross again. It has just made itself known to me. So he got a download all of this time before what happened to John, that John was not going to be coming back. That's a download from the heavenlies. And I feel a little sad, but he has his destiny and I have mine. I think that some of you may have not had the opportunity to get the understanding yet, and I hope that my words will in some way encourage you or help you. I think that there's been a grave injustice done to us by telling us that we have no destiny. And some people that I value, I have heard them say those words in their own way. Whether that's actually what they meant or not is open at this point for interpretation. But I would have you understand that the sheer concept of having a contract is a document with a purpose. You don't just have a contract. It's like, I don't have a contract to eat. Okay? I didn't need a contract for that. But we do know before we come into every life, even though it's not physically us signing a paper, but we do take on the responsibility of a contract with Source. And that's why you return to Him, because when you return to Him is when it's going to be found out whether you accomplish. I believe that we probably know when we leave this life what we didn't accomplish, because what you don't accomplish is also what you're expected to accomplish the next time when you come back in. All tied to higher coming up to God, as you heard on Saturday. And so Dolores says, maybe my question triggered the premonition. I was always hopeful we could follow the story of Jesus further and not lose sight of him when he left the school. It now appeared that it would be possible, since Saudi instinctively knew he would see him again. And so, chapter 22, Jesus travels and Mary. The next time I found Saudi having any association with Jesus, he was around 17 years old. So we've had about 4 years now. And again, being taught at Qumran. Ben Zacharias had not returned to the community, but was with his cousins. I am not sure what that meant. It could be that he was staying with Mary and Joseph in Nazareth. For the brothers and the sisters of Jesus were also his cousins. And I thought that when Jesus received his certificate and left, he would no longer have to take lessons from the Essenes. Wouldn't that be a kick in the pants to find out that Yeshua, while he had intuition, and there's no question that he was very psychic, but isn't it funny that even having those psychic abilities, he felt as if he needed education? Why? Because he needed knowledge. Because he was not ignorant. And so, Saudi says, this is true. He does not have to. It is actually not so much teaching as it is discussing questions and talking about things. For several years he left and was on travels and has returned again. He desires instruction in certain questions that he has brought to us. There are questions as far as some of the prophecies as to what their meanings are. So there you go again. I mean, do you see how this is? He leaves and go away. Can I tell you where he left and went away to? They have that tracked, friends. At one point, he spent 6 years in a Tibetan monastery. Why did he need to go sit with his legs crossed and meditate for 6 years? Why did God need to do that? First off, because he wasn't God. His light was from God, just as yours and mine is. And so there are questions as far as some of the prophecies as to what their meanings are. Also, some of the interpretations. There are many laws which are very open to interpretations, and we are looking at different points of view of these things, like taking it one way and then looking at it and deciding if it could also be taken some other way, and what the ramification of doing this would be. And just so you know, that's still going on today, because I constantly put things that you've heard your whole life in front of you, and I go, but have you considered this perspective? Have you considered what did Yeshua really mean when he said, you are light? And so Dolores says, this is good. You are teaching him to think for himself. And Saudi responds, and to question of things. Yes, to never take something at face value. He said in his travels he noticed that many of the teachers spoke in ways that people do not understand. He is concerned about this. So if you need the validation, the fact that he, on his travels, he was in the presence of teachers just brings another aspect of the writings they have of him in ancient Tibetan monasteries. He is concerned about this. He thinks there must be a way to speak to them so they will know of what you speak, by comparing the knowledge to things that they know and see about them in their day-to-day lives, and in this way perhaps they will understand the message. He watches nature and he sees lessons in the simplest things. How many lessons did Yeshua teach out of nature? Parable of the tares, the parable of the wheat, just on and on again. The 5 classifications of humans, that there are those who are seed that are cast onto rocks. And he is concerned about this. He thinks there must be a way to speak to them so they will know of what you speak, by comparing the knowledge to things that they know and see about them in their day-to-day lives, and in this way, perhaps they will understand the message. He watches nature and he sees lessons in the simplest things, that I could never see. And I asked for an example. There's a plant that grows and it increases in a strange way. The way it grows, it will shoot up a small plant from the roots. Other plants can come up from the roots, and the branches that grow up will bend over and out. And when they contact the ground, again, put down roots and start a new offspring plant. He said this is a good example of man's cycle of lives. That the plant putting up new plants was from the roots was like a man going through rebirth. So stop and ponder this for just a second. For some of you, you may still be having problems believing in reincarnation. I don't have any problems in that. But if you do, then take the wisdom and just ponder. Okay, so even if you haven't yet come to know it inside of you as a truth, think about the ramifications that we hear that you're going to pay for the karma of what you did in a last life, plus you're going to pay for the karma of what you did in this life. And we then see a metaphor given that our lives are like plants, and they grow up and they go over here and they plant root in our next life. That's why they have thousands and hundreds of thousands of people who have phobias only to find out that they had a past life and they died from drowning, or they died from fire, or they died from some other way, and they find that that other way was in a past life. That is the plant that is planted in the new life. Friend, you have a long history behind you of plants that you have been. And so that is like our life cycles, our rebirths. That the plant putting up new plants from the roots was like a man going through rebirths, and the branches tipping over and making new plants. That way would be the man's family and his children descending that way while he comes back for new lives and he starts new families. He uses circles in many of his examples of this. I've talked a lot about cycles. Everything is a cycle. There is no other thing that isn't cycles. It is why the rings are in the pond. It is why the tide comes in and out. It's all reverberation of energy in cycles. And it's constant. It never goes away. Why does the tide not quit? And who can say when it started and what caused it? And so he used another plant as an example. A plant that is composed of many layers, similar to an onion, Dolores puts in there. He said that this would show the different planes of existence. So now we have someone telling us about what quantum physics are just now finding out, friend. How does that happen? How does a guy that's a spiritual being have revelation, wisdom, and understanding of things that only the most intelligent minds in our society are being able to deal with? And he pointed out at the very center, he said, this would show the different planes of existence. Many of you may have no concepts about the different dimensions that are going on, and that in reality everything is all going on at the same time. That may confuse you. But he said that this would show the different planes of existence. He pointed out at the very center of the plant, the layers are very thin and close together. If one can consider each layer as a different plane, one can see that at the center, where it's the smallest and the most limited, that is like the physical world. So stop for a second and ponder that. All that you think is important is the least. We we are on a wonderful path if we will continue on this path to one of the most amazing enlightenment that's ever happened. Because when we begin to realize that all of this that we thought was reality is at the basis form of everything that exists, then I promise you we can then and then alone begin to open our eyes to the greatness that is around us, even to the greatness that we already are. And so he said that this would show the different planes of existence. He pointed out at the very center of the plant, the layers are very thin and close together. If one can consider each layer as a different plane, one can see that at the center, where it is the smallest and the most limited, that is like the physical world. As one travels upward and outward into the planes, one's horizon of understanding would expand each layer, and you would see and understand more. So we could actually talk about enlightenment, but then if we really track true with what's going on here, actually enlightenment is a process that continues. This is the lowest form of enlightenment that exists. The enlightenment that we gain in the next layer will be infinitely greater than what this is. And so one's horizon of understanding would expand each time, and you would see and understand more. So we're to do all that we can do if we grab the point, if we get it in our heart, what we're put here for, then we will begin to be like Pac-Man, and we will run around everywhere, and we will eat up all of the knowledge and all of the wisdom and all of the understanding that we can eat up. That's a really good metaphoric picture, because those of you who are dinosaurs like myself know that Pac-Man just goes around and he just chomps. Well, that's how we ought to be living our lives. That's exactly, if you, seeing in my mind what Saudi said earlier, that's exactly how Yeshua lived. And he just went around like a Pac-Man, and he chewed up every bit of knowledge everywhere he went. He saw things and he saw what they meant. And we're supposed to be doing that. And so, another example, he came by from watching the water. These are things that Yeshua, I guess, teachings that he referred, or that him and Saudi had conversation with, I get the feeling. And he pointed out how a wave could come in from the sea and lap up on the shore and pick up a bit of debris, and when this bit of debris is put back down, it's almost at the same place that it was before, but moved over slightly. And so the piece of debris will gradually travel down the shore, being picked up and placed back down by the waves. He said that this is like our cycle of lives. Yet again, another metaphor of constant again and again and again. And your spirit is redeposited as it's a little bit further along the way of where you're meaning to go. I said that on Saturday. There will be people, if we've been 1,000 lives, there will be people that will get out of here with the wisdom and understanding they will accomplish in this lifetime. They will have accomplished what they needed to learn. And for other people that haven't, they will get another chance and another chance and another chance until they finally reach the end. I read that to you out of the ancient text, and I've told you that personally thousands of times. And when we can allow ourselves to understand that the horribleness that's been done to us by the singularity of a single death, a single life, death, and judgment at God's hand on us. As long as you stay in that paradigm, you are hopelessly stuck. You are like the toddy bowl man when it gets flushed. You just go around and around and around and around and around in the boat, and you never go anywhere. And so the good news is you got a boat. So your spirit is redeposited, and it's a little bit further along the way of where you're meaning to go. So we have not only been doing that, we will continue to do that, friends. We will continue to do that. Every one of you. Some of you, if you die tomorrow, you'll be in the heavenlies, and you'll know that what's being said is true. And you will be in a place, and you will have to spend the time to look at your Akashic record, and you will do all those things. And whether it be 1 year, 3 days, 3 months, or 30,000 years before you come back again, you will choose to come back again. This is a choice. That's why you see that in almost every NDE across the board. They are told that you will go back, but it's anticipated that you will, and they do, most of them, as they gain understanding and knowledge while they're there about what their purpose is, immediately they want to come back to earth. Cryon talks about this, people wanting to come back to earth. Why, if this is the lowest, densest, worstest place? Well, because this is the lowest, worstest, densest place, but this is also not where we're supposed to be living. The problem is we have been relegated to a stature of very low class, which means very low frequency. And as that frequency is increased, we will no longer remain in the same plane, although we're in the same existence. Have I confused anybody? Because it is quantum physics. And so he said that this is the cycle of life. We come in and we get deposited, we moved a little bit, and we come in and we get deposited and we moved a little bit. And that's how it is. And until we no longer are coming in, and nobody really knows the answer as to whether there is ever an end of coming in. It's expected. Yeshua came in multiple different teachers' names. Might have been Yogananda, might have been Buddha, might have been Allah. I mean, he's been in multiple names. And he's coming back again. The Christ, not Jesus, the Christ, the anointed, the chrism. And he says, your spirit is redeposited, and it is a little bit further along the way of where you're meaning to go. So if you get that, and if you stop for a second and really think about that a little bit, he almost gives us a picture, and I think he's probably right, that we may have made a choice in the beginning of where we wanted to end up, and it may take us 1,000 lives to get there. The concept, the who you are going to become as a person is not going to change. It's just a matter of how long you have to go through this till you get to that, because we're probably not that now. That's a pretty amazing picture right there for you. And so Dolores says that would make sense. It would also show how slowly it happens. Saudi responds, it is a very slow process, and one must have much patience and work on it diligently. So how much more when you've lived a life of ignorance and you haven't done anything? Or even worse, as truth starts coming out, you choose still to do nothing. You can almost see a metaphoric picture of hell is for people who did not gain enlightenment. Why? Because they're just going to continue in this slop hole at the frequency they are again and again and again and again. And I don't know about you, that would be hell to me. And so it seems as though Jesus was beginning to develop his concept of parables. And I wonder if some of these were still too complicated for the average person of his day to understand. Even so of our day to understand. I promise you, I've been in thousands of churches where nobody had understanding about what was being taught. These are not mentioned in the Bible, most likely because of their references to reincarnation, which the early church strongly objected to. You know why you don't believe in reincarnation? Because the Catholic Church told you that there was no reincarnation, to totally defy everything that the true followers of Yeshua would have believed. They had to replace Yeshua with someone. They had to give you a God-man to worship. You couldn't have had just a simple human being with a spirit that was special and significant. They couldn't have done that, because if they had done that, then you would only desire to hear his truth, not their truth. And so these teachings, these parables that they have are not in the Bible, although most people can't understand the parables that are in the Bible, or at least not fully. And so, most likely, because of their references to reincarnation, which the early church strongly objected to, the parables that are included in the Bible show that he continued to simplify his teachings and often used things in nature as a reference. Dolores asked, does he tend to stick to the letter of the law, or is he rather broad in his interpretation? Saudi responds, he is broad in his interpretation in that he feels that love is the only law that one must abide by solely. And so that gives a new perspective, not in the way that they define it, but in a new perspective, a paradigm shift of everything is love. God is love, and in him is no darkness at all. God is love. Not might be, not could be, not should be. God is love. And the rule that we have to abide by is that of love, because love conquers all sin. Why most people can't conquer the sin in their life is because they have no love. Because love would conquer sin. Love would make you say, no, I'm not going to say that, and hurt that person. And so we think that we even understand simple words like love, and yet the deeper metaphysical manifestation of the word of love isn't anything that's taught in any place. It truly is the essence of loving everyone else exactly the same way. That's how that verse should even be spoken. You are to love everyone else the exact same way that you love yourself. And as I explained to you, actually, in reality, manifestation-wise, you really are doing that. But you haven't stopped to consider first the place where the beam is or the splinter. You haven't looked at yourself. And until you look at yourself, you won't treat people any differently. And the minute that you see how pathetic you are, you will begin to see how pathetic everyone else is. And then there's no competition, because we all fall in the same plane. And so, before, when I asked Saudi who accompanied Jesus as a child, he said it was his cousin Joseph. I'm sorry. I jumped way, didn't I? Yeah, does he tend to stick to the letter of the law, or is he rather broad in his interpretation? He is broad in his interpretation in that he feels that love is the only law that one must abide by solely. And after that, all of the others pale in insignificance. We did not teach him this. He came by this conclusion through inner, what do I say, discussions with his higher self. That's crazy. It's right there in front of you. And deciding how he feels about certain things. Love cannot be taught. That's why most people don't have it. Because it's something that has to be sought. How many times have you walked into a Walmart and said, God, I want you to teach me today how to love people the way that you love? Have you ever asked yourself that question? That should be a daily question to the spirit realm. Help me learn to love people the way Source loves people. Most people don't do that because most people don't want to know that. Because then if you knew that, you would be commanded to do something else. And that, of course, would be bad, I'm sure. And so, he says, we did not teach him this. He came by this conclusion through inner, what do I say, discussions with his soul. Just so you know, Yeshua could never do all that Yeshua did unless he went and learned what he learned in Tibet, what he learned in the ancient mystics, what he learned about meditation and thought process and contemplation and breathing, all the things that the mass majority of people that I speak to will never waste their time to go find out how important it is to your spiritual life. In fact, some would ask if you can even have a spiritual life without those things. So, love cannot be taught. It is something that must just grow. And again, I'm not explaining myself very clearly. The only restrictions he spoke of were those concerning harming other human beings and other living beings. If this guy really did talk to Yeshua, guys, you just got to hear what his belief system was. Absolutely. Exactly what his belief system was. Totally metaphysical, totally about loving other people. Wow. And so the only restrictions he spoke of were those concerning harming other beings and other living beings. So please don't tell me that God is just really kind to all the Hitlers and Mussolinis on the face of the earth. There is a natural law that he grabbed a hold of that is ingrained in us about not hurting. Then the only dialogue you need to have is what happens to those that don't. I don't care. I'm not going to be one of those. I don't care what happens to Hitler. I don't care what happened to Mussolini. I don't care what happened to every serial killer. I could care less what happens to them. That's none of my timeline. What is my timeline is what happens to me. And so the only restrictions he spoke of were those concerning harming other human beings and other living beings. To not physically harm other living beings and to try to not mentally harm them either. Wow. Oh, I'm sorry. God is mind. Everything is mind. Why would he have a desire to not hurt their minds if mind is not all? He knows the power that thought has. If you think something's strong enough, the vibration sent out will cause it to come to pass. And that's exactly ties with what I was talking about at the beginning, friends. The vibrations that you are sending out are bringing to you the things which you are sending vibes out, because that's what your mind's focused on. If your mind is focusing on a video game, I guarantee you may be really good at that video game, but you are mindless to anything else. Nothing else is important. And that can happen in 1,000 ways in our lives, so we don't just have to look at one, but there is one that's very prominent in our society. And so he knows the power that thought has. If you think something strong enough, the vibration sent out will cause it to come to pass. Once again, manifestation. And he is aware of this power. Oh, I promise you, he's like way aware of the mental power of a human being. It is important not to think evil in your heart. That would be what I was talking of earlier, which is your intent. Where did he go on his travels? Sadi responds, where did he not go? He traveled all over most of the world as we know it. It is said that Joseph of Arimathea, his uncle, went with him. Well, actually, he went with Joseph on Joseph's ships. We know that. He was a tin merchant. And so, before when I asked Sadi who accompanied Jesus as a child, he said it was his cousin Joseph. Although he did not seem too sure of the relationship, this may not be a contradiction, but an honest mistake. Sadi might not have been too sure how Joseph was related, except that he knew he was a relative of Mary's, and he referred to him as Jesus' uncle from this point in the story and onward. Did his mother go with him? Sadi responds, during part of the travels, but then she had to stay home with his sisters and brothers. His father stays and goes about his work. He is very much of this world. Yosef, he is a very good man, but he is very practical. So why don't you hear about the story of Yosef? Did you know that I haven't ever found anywhere in any of the Bible writings where it is ever attributed that Joseph died? Although every one of you believed that he did. I've heard scholars say, well, we don't know what happened to him, but we think maybe he died. Wow, that's an intelligent guess. And the truth of the matter, wouldn't it be quite crazy if you thought it was just Yeshua and his mother and his sister, and his daddy was at home working? Interesting, for sure. And so, before when I asked Sadi Joseph was the name. Joseph was the tin merchant with the ships that traveled all over the earth that history has written down outside of these documents, that Yeshua was in England, just like Paul was in England. They hid that from you too when they took the 29th chapter of Acts out of the Bible. Most of us did not have a clue there was a 29th chapter of Acts with Paul in the nation of England. Well, it wouldn't have been hard for Paul to get there. All he had to do was get on Joseph's ship and go. And so, Sadi might not have been too sure how Joseph was related, except that he knew he was a relative of Mary's. He referred to him as Jesus' uncle from this point onward in the story. And so she says, did his mother go with him? Sadi responds, during part of the travels, but then she had to stay home with his sisters and brothers. Yaakov was his next brother in line, Simeon, Jude, and his father stays and goes about his work. He is very much of this world. Yosef, he is a very good man, but he is very practical. Then that seems strange to have such a difference between the mother and the father. Sadi asked, why is this strange? To have such a difference between the mother and the father. Why is that strange? You have one that is very much living in another dimension. Wow, this is so crazy. And you have one that lives in the here and now. It's like there is one in the room that can hear what's being said, and others who simply can't. And they go about their life and all the things they think are important that are carnal material things in this world. They cleave to, they manifest those things in their life. That is to say, if all you can think about is your job, that's all that you are manifesting is your job. So when people ask you, what do you have? I have a job. Because that's what's in the front of your mind. What's important to you. And so, he says, so what is so strange about it? It gives a balanced look at things. You have one that is very much living in another dimension. And that's a really cool way to say that, I'm telling you. And you have one that lives in the here and the now. It gives him a view of both sides. And so she asked, are any of Ben Joseph's brothers and sisters interested in the things that he is? Ooh, here's the drum roll. Sadi responds, perhaps, but not to the great extent that he is. They are, in fact, that they love their brother and would be interested in the things that he is, but he has gone beyond them. Are not all brothers different from one another? That's why you also see that there seems to be a discrepancy in the teachings of the people after Yeshua died. Some believe that that's because they didn't really fully understand or know. Even his own brothers like James did not understand and know what his teaching was. Why? They never spent 6 years meditating, so why would they stand in Jerusalem with no experience at doing this and tell people to meditate? They wouldn't have. And so, in an earlier session, Saudi had said that before Messiah was born, his mother was known to the Essenes. I wondered how they knew whom she was going to be. Saudi responds, she was chosen by the elder to be instructed and for her destiny to be made known to her. So they're having a Pentecostal meeting. They're calling psychic power to come and tell Mary what it is that's coming for her. I'm sure you won't hear that in your version of the Bible. And so she was chosen by the elders to be instructed and for her destiny to be made known to her. It was known from her birth whom she would be, and her parents were of us. So in other words, in that little piece, you find that Mary was groomed for most of her life for what her destiny was. And then you have to begin to ponder a question, or at least you could. Well, if that's true for her, is it possible that the same was true for Yeshua? Is it possible that the same was true for John? And more relevant at some levels for us is it possible that everything that you've been through, the things you hate, the things you can't stand, the things you run from, and the things that you may actually be able to get a grasp on, is it possible that every one of those things is trying to groom you to where you're eventually going to end up at? Whether that's 1,000 lives from now is totally dependent on you. But that source is always pushing us towards the place. And I believe he is, and I believe he's answered us what the place is. The whole thing is, until you learn to love people, you ain't getting out of here. Sorrowful, but that's the hidden truth none of you may have experienced or understand yet. Until you learn love, you will not leave this place. So Saudi says, and I'm going to finish this page and then we'll pause there. Dolores says, I have read an Edgar Cayce book that Mary had been chosen from many other young girls, so I questioned with this in my mind. Dolores said, did they choose her from others? So now what she's actually doing, she's actually comparing another guy who was an astral projector who could go into other places and see other things, like we're all supposed to be, fully psychic. Edgar Cayce was a teacher for all of us of what we should be. And all of us missed that, and they called him a prophet and then called him a demon worshiper. He was neither. So, Dolores asked, did they choose her from others? She's remembering what she read in Edgar Cayce's writings, and if you haven't, you ought to go look at some of Edgar Cayce's stuff. Pretty amazing, all the things that he spoke about. Not just have come to pass, but that he spoke about. And so, Saudi says, how can we choose the mother of the Messiah? It is not up to us. That is up to Yahweh. But he allowed us to know, so that we might instruct her and perhaps guide her upon the path. The elders knew, but they did not choose. Oh my God. They knew, but they did not choose. If that could happen with the elders, friends, the message that should come very loud and clear to us is there are going to be plenty of people around who have heard and still they don't choose it. For whatever reason. And maybe there's millions of those too. And so He says, the elders knew, but they did not choose. It is said that there are others whose charts could possibly have fit. So it wasn't Mary. There were others that could also have been the mother. But there was study, and it was decided that this was the only basic decision that I can think of was made. The chart was read, and it was finally understood in what was meant. I am not explaining this very well. Dolores says, oh, I think you're doing an excellent job of it. How is the chart made up? Saudi says, it is said that it has to do with the points at which the stars lie when you are born. And that's very relevant today. And the path that they take while you live. But I do not create these, therefore I know very little about them. The master of this, Ben Goliad, I remember when we went to the classes, they tried to teach me to follow the stars. I'm not very good at this. It is not my field of study. But even then, they were charting and studying the stars and gaining insight from them. You also know that's the reason why the star was used. And so he was becoming frustrated. We were having a communication problem here, understanding exactly what he meant. And so he says, you still do not understand. We did not choose her. We were allowed to have the knowledge in which to find out who she was, in order that we might help her along the path. Now take this and think this beautiful thought. So they didn't pick Mary. They were simply blessed enough to be given knowledge that came from source that told them who Mary was. And it wasn't so they could know who Mary was. It was so that they could be here on this earth and help her complete her task. Well, stop and think about your life. What if all of the people, some of them you might hate, some of them you might discuss, but what if those people were truly put in your life and you chose not to accept them or chose not to learn what knowledge source had sent you? How many times do you think in the course of your life that has happened? More than you can count. For all of us. As though talking to a child, the only thing as far as someone's decision is about the interpretation of these charts. There were several girls who were born at approximately the same times that it was possible, and therefore the ultimate interpretation came about. This was when that it was discovered that she would be the mother of the Messiah. So once again, what does that do? Well, that kind of blows a lot of holes in your religious belief system. We're going to stop there, Marianne. And we'll just pick up at that page in 22 next week. So, wow. I don't know if you guys got anything about it. Reading this stuff just blows me away because it fits with so many other pieces. Would that we had been told our whole lives these things. I promise you, friends, every one of us would have lived a better life. And I think probably all of us, if we were honest, have lived a good life, even if it hasn't been a pain-free life. I think sometimes we think that an amazing life is that everything is blissful, and I'm not quite sure that's the proper interpretation of what a good life is. Better that you would find your purpose, and if you don't find that, then it doesn't matter what you do. That's why even large professional musicians come back and have been here many times because they never found it. They had music, they had fame, but they never found the truth. And so, in the scheme of things, I guess it really won't make much difference whether you're back 1,000 times or this is the last time. But I do know as we elevate our frequencies, that the less of these mundane materialistic things that control us anymore, and course, that would take a day to explain. So, anyways, blessings to you guys. I hope you'll ponder over some of this. I hope you'll think about it. Some really amazing truths that have been shared and passed out. And so we'll try to jump back just a little bit next week and pick up, and hopefully we can gain more. But it's quite clear to me, maybe it is to you, maybe it's not, but it's certainly quite clear to me that Yeshua was not what we were told he was. And I guess then you just have to determine which you believe to be the truth. So peace to each and every one of you. I hope that you experience all that all has made for all of us. Shalom. Namaste.